When we talk about the suicide crisis, our collective grief naturally pulls our attention to the very end of the timeline. We focus entirely on the devastating terminal event. But analytically speaking, a terminal event is the ultimate lagging indicator. It tells us what happened, but it is scientifically useless for prevention because it only confirms a process that has already concluded. To understand how someone actually reaches that point, we have to look for the earliest onset of psychic, the clinical term for intolerable psychological pain. We have to trace the timeline backward. This diagram shows the timeline moving in reverse. Starting from the terminus, we can map out the specific conditions that clinical models repeatedly identify long before a crisis hits. We can see early markers for profound disconnection, deep hopelessness, and a perceived loss of value. Society cannot solve this crisis by staring at the tragic conclusion. We have to completely reconstruct how we detect those invisible signals occurring months or even years prior. Our first instinct in a crisis is usually to rush in and build interventions. We want to propose solutions to stop the pain immediately. But jumping straight to a solution skips a crucial scientific step: defining the actual problem. We have to establish strict measurement parameters before we attempt to solve anything. If we try to measure microscopic upstream shifts in human despair using crude downstream tools, we will miss the signal entirely. Before we can attempt to save a life, we need an entirely new measurement architecture, one capable of accurately tracking the exact trajectory of that life over time. The LPOP architecture merges two parallel data streams into a single gauge. First, listening posts capture subjective signals transmitted by people, conversations, self-reports, and digital engagement. Second, observation posts capture external context without direct human interaction, tracking health data, bankruptcies, legal records, and employment changes. The intersection of these two pillars allow analysts to ask crucial diagnostic questions: what preceded an event, what changed afterward, and which caught the signal first. Listening posts hear people, while observation posts see context. True visibility requires both to function simultaneously. Even with that architecture in place, we face a scientific hurdle known as gauge R&R, repeatability and reproducibility. Before we trust the data, we must prove the measurement system itself is reliable. Consider this image of a fragile carton of eggs resting on a massive industrial truck scale. The scale reads 0, but it would be absurd to proclaim the eggs are weightless just because the scale didn't register them. The exact same logic applies to human psychology. The absence of a distress signal often just means our chosen listening post is completely insensitive to the reality of the pain. Any team building this architecture faces a strict requirement. They have to prove their gauge can repeatedly and reproducibly detect faint early signals of distress across thousands of individuals. The immutable rule of this new architecture is simple: you must first trust the gauge before you're allowed to trust the data. When we implement a validated, highly sensitive LPOP system, our mental health efforts shift away from reactive crisis intervention and toward proactive trajectory mapping. Look at the scatter plot. By continuously collecting signals, we can finally see when an individual stops a chaotic downward trend toward entrapment. The data points suddenly align and arc upward into a clear, validated trajectory toward life. By accurately tracking these signals, the ultimate objective evolves. We move past merely delaying death and focus on scientifically verifying a return to life. This architecture provides the technical foundation for a global grand challenge: the X Prize Race to Life. This photo of Peter Diamandis and Elon Musk represents the massive, high-stakes global backing required for this kind of challenge. The competition asks the world's top minds to prove they can track and validate this movement toward life at a population-wide scale. In this framework, hope transitions from an abstract emotion into a quantifiable metric derived from validated signals. By building these listening posts, hope moves from a feeling to a measurement, one that is investable, scalable, and strictly accountable.